It's funny. Happy Sunday! I am back with another story time video. Oh my goodness, you guys. So yesterday I did a retro 80s video about kind of perfume, couple fashion stories, and I had so many comments about the mall. Oh my goodness. So I am doing an entire 80s storytime video about Great Lakes Mall, Mentor, Ohio. So if anyone's from the greater Cleveland area, Great Lakes Mall was huge in the 80s. So what I'm going to do, you know how I'm doing this? I can do it by memory. And I can kind of like go around the mall and talk about the stores because I remember all of them. I loved the mall. Literally my favorite place ever. I remember when I was like little, like 7, 8, 9 years old, my parents taking me to the mall. I would get Swedish fish at Sears. Remember Sears? And I used to love walking around the mall. And believe it or not, my first love of candles came from, I remember they were having one of those like craft type of sales at the mall. And this woman was selling those candles, you know, the ones that you kind of like peel down and they're in like these loops and they're really pretty. They're like rainbows and like all kinds of pretty like ribbons around the side. And she was making them. And I think that's where my love of candles came from because I was so fascinated by this candle making process. So that was actually fun. Once I became a teenager, by the time I was like 14, I lived at the mall. I mean, that was like the place to be. I actually had an older friend who had just gotten her driver's license, and she would pick me up, and I was like 14 going on 15, and we lived at the mall. So the flagship stores back then, Sears, Higbee's, wasn't Dillard's then, it was Higbee's. Horns. Do you guys remember Horns? I think it was Josephine Horns. We just called it Horns. That was a really upscale store. They had like chandeliers and pretty escalators. The May Company, which was pre-Macy's. Remember May Company? And then we had J.C. Penney, which is still there. Oh my gosh, our flagships are really going away. Macy's actually closed last year. J.C. Penney is still hanging out. We never shopped there. And then we had this store called JJ Newberry, and it had a record store in the front called Record Den. And there were 3 record stores, I believe, in the mall. Record Revolution, Record Den, and there was another one that I'm like forgetting because I was always at Record Rep. And I think it was Record Revolution, unless I'm getting confused, but it was right next to Higbee's. And there's this really cute guy there named Rob that we would always go in and see. But my friends, we would just flip through the record albums. We'd always buy pins. Like, I had a whole bunch of Duran Duran pins, B-52s. I remember, like, Roxy Music. Those are my other favorite bands. Tom Petty, I loved. Oh my gosh, so many favorites, but we used to literally sit there. Remember you could get the imports, like the Japanese import records. As we were flipping through the vinyl, once in a while you'd get like a Duran Duran import and we'd be like, oh my gosh, we have to get this. So that was always fun. We'd spend hours at Record Revolution. And I'm just sitting out the corner of my eye. My husband just walked in. What was your favorite store at the mall?
Radio Shack.
No, really? Radio Shack? Of all the cool 80s stores, Radio Shack?
Radio Shack.
What did you buy at Radio Shack?
What didn't I buy at Radio Shack?
Did you buy a Tandy computer?
Yes, I had a Tandy computer. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And they had books about electronics in there, and they had kits.
Okay, you can show your face. Say hi to everybody. Okay, Radio Shack. Hey.
Hello.
You liked Radio Shack. Okay, but you used to go to Randall Park Mall, right? Yes. You did Randall. Yes. Okay, thank you. Well, he was at Randall Park Mall. I was at Great Lakes Mall. So if I start to go around, Does anyone remember Roy Rogers? It was a walk-in restaurant. Oh my gosh, that was a big thing in the 80s. Roy Rogers and York Steakhouse. So Roy Rogers, my mom used to take me to, and you'd go through the line. It was like not really buffet, but you had to like go through like this like turnstile. Yeah, you remember Roy Rogers, don't you? Yeah, he's so interested in my story. He's not leaving. So my mom and I would get like burgers and fries at Roy Rogers, and we'd sit in these booths, and it was all like Western style. And then once in a while, we'd go to York Steakhouse, and they had it upstairs. And what did you get at York Steakhouse?
I have to retract my last statement. I didn't realize we were talking about the Random Mall. Radio Shack was not in the Random Mall.
Okay,
it was in Fast and Southgate.
Okay.
So I retract my last statement. Hobby Depot.
Hobby Depot
was my favorite place. In fact, the Random Mall.
Okay, thank you. Wasn't there a magic store in there too? It was kind of geeky. Didn't you go to a magic store?
There was Eastern Arts, and they had all sorts of cool like samurai swords and stuff.
Okay, well that's good. Okay, so we're bringing Randall Park in here now. I gotta get back to York Steakhouse though. So York Steakhouse, you guys have to remember this. They basically serve steak, and then you'd get a dessert, and the dessert was always like cubed Jello with whipped cream on top. So it was gross. I was not a fan of York Steakhouse. I had other favorites. We're going to go through some of my other favorite mall restaurants. But I think one of my favorite stores, clothing-wise, that we used to go to was the Limited. And it's funny because the Limited's still around, but they're totally different. They've rebranded like 1,000 times. But back in the 80s, the Limited had a brand called Hunter's Run, which was super preppy. We were always into the preppy stuff. I used to wear 3 shirts. We'd wear like a polo shirt with our collar up. Then we'd wear like a button-down shirt like that was blue. And then we'd wear this preppy sweater over that with like Argyle or the Hunter's Run logo on it. So you'd be roasting because you'd have like 3 shirts on, but you looked cool. I loved Hunter's Run. I always went into there. But then I started to get a little bit more alternative. And Winkleman's. I shopped a lot at Winkleman's. Do you remember Chess King? My husband, actually. He didn't talk about Chess King. He used to go to Chess King a lot. Yes, Chess King. And then I'm trying to think what other clothing stores. I actually really liked shopping at Higbee's and the May Company because, like I said, we were trying to act a little bit older than we were. So I would always like get like, I like the silk blouses like at May Company because I thought they made me look older. I like getting jackets. I loved shoes. Oh my gosh. I had so many pairs of shoes that I would get all different styles. Remember the jelly shoes? Those were awful. I remember I had a pair of jelly shoes, wore them all day. I was falling off my little heels, and then I had blisters for like months because they were horrible. I hated those jelly shoes, I gotta say. I do remember wearing a lot of neon. I remember my 8th grade photo. I'll have to dig that up. I was wearing this hideous, like, dress. It was neon pink, and it had like a flip over collar with buttons on it. And it's like short skirt. It was awful. It was absolutely awful. I thought it was cool at the time. But yes, we did wear a lot of neon. I wore skirts all the time. We had short skirts, we had long skirts, we had remember those prairie skirts that we wore. Pinstripe jeans. I must have had 10 pairs of pinstripe jeans. There were a lot of like button-down shirts that I had in all different colors. I don't know if I was actually fashionable. It's funny, we don't have a lot of photos from back then because it wasn't like you were, on your phone taking pictures all the time. You really had to go out of your way to take a picture because you had to load the film. And I wish I had more pictures of that time. So the Limited, we always hit the Limited. Bath & Body Works, remember, did not come out until 1991. So when we were in the 80s, we weren't around. And before I got distracted by my husband coming in, I was going to talk about J.J. Newberry. Oh my gosh. Discount store. I believe they had like a pet store in the back with a monkey. It was a crazy time. This store was enormous. You could get anything at JJ Newberry. I think they had like a snack bar, and then they had the record store and the pet store, like all in one place. It was absolutely incredible. And every store was full back then. Like, they had bookstores. The bookstores, B. Dalton. I remember B. Dalton. I remember there was an office supply store. Oh, Walden Books. I remember Walden Books. What was the office supply store, you guys? I love that place. Really cute. They had Things Remembered. Remember Things Remembered? Lots of jewelry stores because no one bought jewelry online. We all went to the jewelry stores at the mall. That was huge. The place you avoided was like Sears. No one thought Sears was cool back then. That was like, Spencer's, which, by the way, can anyone believe that Spencer's is still in business? They had the weirdest stuff in there, like all novelty stuff, but Spencer's was always like, you had to hit Spencer's when you were at the mall. But we would just like meet up with our friends and like walk around. It was so much fun. We did not have a movie theater at Great Lakes Mall. The movie theater was actually a little bit off to the side. There were like 2 movie theaters, but there were only 3 movies. There was a place called Mentor Mall, and I'm thinking they might have had a Radio Shack in there. I'll have to ask my husband, but there were like 3 theaters and that was it. And you mostly had to see like Star Wars or E.T. We were too young to get into Fast Time Ridgemont High. That was like we could never sneak in, but we always watched like Star Wars, E.T., all of those 80's movies. And then the food court, I believe, opened at some point during my late teen years. They didn't have a food court previous to that, but there were like restaurants throughout the mall. There was a Sbarro's next to Horns. Everybody went to Sbarro. That was like the place to be. Another place that we frequented was the candy counter at May Company because they had Godiva. And I remember my girlfriends and I would go in there and buy these giant chocolate chip cookies, and we get like 3 of them and then we'd all split them. That was like the funnest experience ever. And then we'd buy like 1 piece of Godiva chocolate because that's all we could afford. But I was just enthralled. This is probably why I do what I do today. I loved the makeup counter. Elizabeth Arden, Lancome, Clinique. And it was like a treat to get makeup. Like now, makeup's everywhere. But like, back then we had drugstore makeup. You'd go and get Revlon, you'd get, CoverGirl and stuff. But if your mom, which my mother did, she would take me to like the Clinique counter because my mother was really into the hypoallergenic makeup. So she loved Clinique. She'd take me to the mall and she'd let me get like 1 eyeshadow because we didn't have palettes back then. So she got like me like a purple eyeshadow, I remember, and I was so excited with the little pull-out drawer. I was so cool that I had a Clinique eyeshadow. I remember I loved that eyeshadow so much. I had like this raisin lipstick. That was kind of a color. We had a magenta one. They had the tubes were like the silver tubes with Clinique. And then in my later teens, remember like the giant Elizabeth Arden gift sets you could get? Oh my gosh, I love those so much. But I would hang out at the makeup counter and just look at everything because I was like the colors, all of the stuff. Also have to talk about Camelot music. That's not actually 80's. I want to say that moved in maybe 89, 90. Camelot music was actually where JJ Newberry used to be. Mega music store. I mean, that was where you had the CDs, you had the t-shirt. I mean, everything was in there. I actually met Meatloaf at the Camelot. I remember he was coming there and even my mom wanted to meet him. So I remember we stood in line for like 3 hours and got up to the counter and he signed like one of my cassette tapes, but he was so nice. Oh my gosh. So that was like my big thrill was to like meet Meatloaf then. So the mall was a really important place for me to be back in the 80's. And I'm really hoping that the malls survive because even today, like going into the mall to Bath and Body Works, I love it. I gotta say, there's something magical about the mall. So I know a lot of you are putting all of your favorite stores down below for the mall. Definitely add to my list. The Gap, I'm trying to think. Later ones. Remember Hollister was around. I'm trying to think as the mall evolved. Yankee Candle didn't come until a little bit later. Oh my gosh. I'm trying to like walk around the mall and like think of I used to spend a lot of time in Winkleman's. That was like one of my favorite places. But oh, Pepperidge Farm. There was an actual store for Pepperidge Farm. I used to love that place too. It was always fun picking out stuff. Anyway, now I'm on like mall nostalgia. I'm gonna have to look up like every store at the mall in the 80s because now like I gotta find out where I actually shopped. Anyway, I hope this was fun. Post your favorite mall experience below. I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.